time is it? Good afternoon, everybody. And welcome. Thanks for coming on such a hot afternoon. You're right. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge we're on the country of the Dja Dja Wurrung and Wurrung people, whose land this festival is held on. And I'd like to acknowledge the elders, the ancestors, elders, past and present, and the current descendants that keep the culture alive in this country, and how privileged we are at Rainbow Serpent Festival to be working with the traditional owners of this land and many traditional owners from many lands within Australia, and the First Nation people who we just saw, who are the elders that we have here from First Nations that are also here contributing to the festival. So thank you for being here. My name is Lynne, and I'm the director of the Rainbow Arts and Culture Foundation, one of the directors, one of a great team. The foundation is Rainbow Serpent's not-for-profit. We're fairly new, and we're starting on a few projects that really are connecting the art of this festival into the community. So you may have noticed the flags, colourful flags in Lexington as you drove through. That was a community project that we worked with the community to decorate the streets in rainbow style. We also, if you've walked around the festival, you may have noticed various art installations, large and small. We co-work with Rainbow Serpent Festival to provide funding through a grants program to provide artists with an opportunity, emerging artists, to present work at an international music festival. So there's some spectacular pieces out there. We also have an artist in residence program. I'm working with Alex Sanson, or we are, sorry, not just me. And from that, we are creating a new work that's in Rainbow Serpent style, but it will be a permanent art piece that will be situated in Beaufort, and it's part of our long-term plan to grow a whole sculpture trail, permanent trail through the Pyrenees, and that trail will give the opportunity for regional Australians to engage in art. It'll also bring tourism into the community because it'll create a new economy. It's obviously, we're transitioning from agricultural into new industries here. We've got wind happening. Cultural economies are on the move in Australia. And we also, through the program, will have arts mentoring. So we will mentor young people from local schools in the process of building art. And also, part of this project is to develop a masterclass. So we are documenting Alex's process to build the sculpture, and that will become a 5-part series and be available online to everyone. And it will nourish emerging artists and people who are, in this case, want to learn more about kinetic sculpture and that practice. So that is what today is about. We're introducing the Cradle, which is the sculpture, and Alex, and we're going to present a masterclass in kinetics. So I'm actually going to hand over to my colleague Alex Sanson, Metaform, and let's get started. Thank you, Alex.
Well, thank you very much, Lynne. Before we get started, I also would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional country of the Dja Dja Wurrung and Wurrung peoples, and pay respect to their ancestors, elders past and present, along with today's descendants that carry on the living culture and ensure its survival for future generations. I'll just start a little showreel of my work while I have a bit of a chat about what I do and how I got here. So let's see if we can... There we go. So, I think my name's Alex Sanson. As Lynne said, I've been making sculpture for 25 years or more, and in fact, actually really my whole life as a kid, although I didn't really call it sculpture then. In recent years, I've been particularly passionate about kinetic sculpture, that is, sculpture that moves. And since about 2000, I've been making larger scale works, and in fact, my first festival work was actually at this festival in 2001. And since then, I've installed work at, I've lost count, but 50 festivals or more. I'm now a full-time artist with Kinetic Sculpture really as my principal activity. And I really love Kinetic Sculpture for the way it catches the eye, for the changing forms, for the hypnotic motion, and the way it engages with a broad audience, sometimes an audience that may not normally be that interested in art. So I'm very honoured that Lynne and the Foundation has chosen me to be Artist in Residence, and I hope that somehow I can contribute some of my experience to the Foundation and to anyone that might be interested in learning through this Foundation and this series of documentaries that the Foundation has commissioned. You can see various examples of my kinetic work in the background. So this project that Lynne mentioned it's not just about me making one sculpture, but it's much more about a cooperative effort between many groups in our community, local arts groups in the Pyrenees, Beaufort Arts Group and others, the local council who's been very enthusiastic about it, possibly the Men's Shed in Beaufort, myself, and ultimately other artists that may be commissioned to make artwork for this arts trail, as well as this festival, which has become an important part and contributor to the local Pyrenees community. And I'm really excited that this foundation is designed to really spread the wings and the influence and hopefully the positive impact that this festival can provide outside our little enclosed space here, and hopefully spread that effect in some good way out into the broader community. So although this arts trail is a project much larger than one particular sculpture, I'm talking today particularly about the sculpture that I am, or that we've been planning on me making, which has the working title of Cradle. So let's see if we can. Okay, so we have, when Lynne and the Foundation asked me to start working on a design, this was the very first sort of serious concept image that I came up with. And I'm not going to read all this, but this is basically my artist's statement about the work. In essence, it's the idea is many hands which represent all the different pillars of our community, the artist, the festival, the council, all the different people and institutions that are coming together to try and create an artwork and a project that will draw people in, will interest people, engage with the community, hopefully add to the economic future of the area. And the globe, which we saw on the last slide and we'll see on future ones, is, I guess, it represents many things. It's this idea that we have of trying to contribute to our local community, but it's also the earth with its many interconnected forces and influences, connections and so forth. So this is an early little animation. This is in a virtual site, and this is really to show how the public may experience the sculpture, and it shows a little of the kinetic element and the scale, as someone may walk up a path through a park. It does show in a simulated sort of fashion some of the kinetic aspect of it, and spheres for me is a common motif in my artwork. Just such a beautiful, simple form, but it's so representative of the globe without boundaries and barriers and all of the interconnection within it. The kinetic aspect of it is relatively simple, but when we get to the engineering aspect of it later, it was very complex actually to make happen in a way that we can get it signed off on, but it's simply an inner sphere that will be spun by the wind. This will happen at different speeds depending on wind effect. From a distance, I've made sort of similar sort of style things. You don't really see a spinning sphere, you just see sort of this shifting, slowly coalescing, moving shapes and surfaces. Up close you will see it a little bit more, but so you'll get a different experience depending on where you are. This is as we... so the previous couple of images were particularly about starting to produce some material that we could go to council, go to local community groups and forums where we had started to get community input about whether they like this idea and try and generate enthusiasm, talk to the council about how we might make it work. And so this is actually a site that many of you may have driven past on the way to this festival by the railway in Beaufort, opposite a pub. And it's what will be the main entrance to town when the Beaufort bypass happens in a few years. So these are just sort of useful images to visualise how this sculpture may work. And the land is somewhat is sort of somewhat neglected, you might say, at the moment. And so part of this project is not just about making a sculpture, but about renovating this whole park, sort of placemaking, improving the amenity for locals, as well as hopefully being part of a tourist attraction that will bring people to the area. Just more views of it from different angles. It connects through one of the red sheds on the right is another local sort of arts sort of group association, and so it's designed to kind of generate something of an arts precinct in Beaufort. Once the whole idea and the whole project started to take shape more, I had to get more stuck into detailed design, start thinking about how we can make it safe and actually work. So the design starts to get fleshed out a bit more, and it starts to change a little bit as all of the technical details start getting resolved. How to stop people climbing it and falling off and such things, which in a public space, unsupervised, is a little different to a festival environment. A few just screenshots from my CAD software. So I design all these things in a three-dimensional CAD software. Great to develop my design process for all the technical aspects of it. Great to communicate with engineers, and it allowed me to generate all these previous images to communicate with all the various stakeholders and community. We'll just flick through quickly a few quick screenshots of the sort of details of elements of it that I have to design. So one important thing, especially in permanent work in the community, is we have to get council approval, we have to have engineering certificates, we have to do risk assessments, and we have all these practicalities of the making of the artwork. That's beyond the initial rush of excitement about a concept that we might have. It's all the things that we have to do to actually get it off the ground. It involves a lot of very detailed drawing. It gets quite tedious, but to produce all these drawings, but it's an essential part of the communication with people like engineers. And it's always it's a challenging process working with engineers to get these things passed. They have very rigid ideas of what is and isn't acceptable quite often. And you have to really communicate well and negotiate well to find a solution that they will accept. And obviously from their point of view, they're signing off to say that this thing will be safe for 25 years plus. And if it's not safe, it really comes back and haunts them terribly. So you have to understand their point of view, but we want to preserve the aesthetic and creative intent at the same time. A few little technical drawings that we have to produce. So this kinetic sculpture, unlike many that I've made, is driven by the wind rather than by an electric motor, for example. And a wind sculpture that has to survive for at least 25 years is a very different beast to something that might come to a festival like this. An engineer will assume worst case scenario sort of winds, 1 in 100-year winds. So in this case, 168 kilometre-hour winds the engineers assessed it for. So designing something where a globe will spin at low wind speed to produce a nice effect when there's just a little breeze blowing, but will also survive extremely high winds in ferocious storms, was quite a challenge. And my engineers initially wanted me to put it in a wind tunnel, which is beyond the scope of this project. You need to have some budget so far beyond what we might ever hope to achieve such things. So it was a very difficult negotiation, but we got there in the end to come up with an adequate solution. Other important aspects of this process are really the risk assessment. This is just a screenshot of part of the risk assessment. And sometimes these things seem like it's aspects of an overly cautious society, which in some ways we've become. But on the other hand, if we're proposing to put a sculpture and a construction out there in public space, we do bear a responsibility to ensure it's safe for all manner of people that might experience it. And just we had to have a big meeting about how do we make it safe enough, and this was just one way of visualizing whether someone can reach in and stick their hand in a spinning sphere and so on. So part of it is not just the sculpture, but it is how it sits in the site. And we had that early little animation which was in a virtual site, and which is a bit of a funny thing, because sculpture is so much about the site that it's in and considering it. So really connecting it to the site, considering the landscaping, we have to consider sight lines for the trains passing and for the traffic. But also we'll just make it nice for mostly for the community, but also for visitors to sit, play, have lunch, so what plantings and so on might contribute to that. And so finally we get to some of the sort of high quality rendered images of the finished design. It will be about 5.3 metres tall, about a 2 metre high sphere, made of steel, Corten steel, which is this rusted weathering steel, structural steel, and the globe will be a sort of a glittering stainless steel, marine grade. Okay, could we just flick to the CAD, please? Oh, there it is. And so this is just a quick little look at, this is a viewer from my CAD software. So when such a huge part of the process of developing public art is communicating what it's going to be like for all the interested parties. Both how it looks, this is sort of a false colour image of it, just to show the different components. But to talk to the town planners and the council, the engineers, about how it's going to work, how it's really going to be. It's such a useful tool to be able to communicate, how it might actually sit in the space that they are responsible for. So it just allows. Oh, no, it's not working. It allows just showing all different views and really interrogating the sculpture to pull up any detail that that someone may request. Let's see, where are we up to? I think we're pretty close to that being it, I think. So thank you very much. And I think Lynn's got...
Wow, so this has already been 12 months, at least, I think even more than 12 months of just getting to this stage. So concept, design, engineering, meetings, site, government, community. There's just been so many aspects to getting the design to this stage, and we envisage it'll take 12 more months to actually fabricate and install the sculpture. But one of the things that has been amazing about having this time is we've thought of so many other ways we can share this information and this learning with other people, because we've been taking our time. So as I mentioned before, we'll be able to, we thought about developing an arts apprenticeship or about and engaging with schools. That's one element. And this element today, and what we're going to see next, is the actual documentation. So we're following Alex we're following Alex through the process, and this 5-part masterclass series will be online with each stage of the process. So because we're taking it slowly, we're actually able to fully document. So now, just like to share with you the first masterclass that's come out of it. It's the stage 1, an introduction to the whole concept of kinetics. So we'll view that now.
I'll hop out the way for a moment. All right, I might as well come in. Kinetic Sculpture. I focus on kinetic mechanical sculpture, installation art, especially big outdoor pieces, some smaller, more interactive indoor pieces. Sculpture for, probably 25 years, maybe more now. I grew up in the bush, spent most of my childhood playing in the bush and on the river. My entire life was various escapades in that world. After that, uni and studied many different things, something of a dilettante, and I started off with physics and maths. Physics I was particularly passionate about. I went and worked in my uncle's physics lab in WA for a while after school. But I did find academic life a bit too stifling. time. I never did a complete fine art degree.
This is the first time we've played the video, so we actually have realised that the file size is not compatible with what we're trying to achieve today. So our brilliant, amazing technical team are actually just sorting that out. And we might just, in the meantime, we weren't going to do a Q&A about anything until after seeing the video, but maybe we'll just open up the floor now, just while we're waiting to get our tech sorted, to just maybe if anyone would like to talk to Alex or have any questions, and I'll start it off around the background of Kinetics. Now, this is actually, when we started researching other kinetic permanent sculptures in the world, we actually found out there aren't very many at all. You know, there's one more in Victoria. We have a kinetic sculpture down in Docklands, which is moving kind of leaves, I think. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it's wind-driven. And then globally, there's very, very few, and they're mostly in very First Nation, not First Nation, but very affluent societies in Europe where everyone's very techie. So, Alex, just do you want to explain a little bit to us what is the barrier in creating a permanent kinetic sculpture, and what and in this project, how have you managed to get around some of those challenges?
Well, anything with movement is just vastly more time consuming to make. Instead of something static, where we have bearings and moving parts, it requires much higher precision machining and construction. It adds a lot of load to a structure, so an engineer will sort of double the load for any part of the sculpture where there's dynamic motion occurring. So the exact same structure, if we made the inner globe static, if it had to cope with a certain sort of wind load, the engineers will just automatically double that because of the dynamic impact. So it has to have that added strength. We have to start considering fatigue in much greater detail, which is just as elements bend in the movement, that over time can break things. As that freeway sign that just fell over in the other day was fatigue from movement in the wind. So there's all these just big sort of technical considerations, especially if it's going to be a permanent thing rather than just at a festival. You don't really have to worry about fatigue for a festival. It's only for 4 days. But for permanent, you really need to consider how it's going to work in the long term. And there's safety aspects of it, of whether someone can get their hand in it and, be injured, essentially.
Is anyone in the audience from a background in art or in engineering that might have a question for Alex around the process he's had of translating impermanent kinetic festival work into a permanent piece at all, or any other question? You can share my mic. Yep.
Hello. Yeah, I just wanted to know if you have a installation and you've obviously fail-safed it for, let's say, 20 years, not to be morbid, but let's say yourself or your team either are no longer around or you're out of the field, what's the backup for when things go wrong and have fatigued? Basically, how does the council or someone else who's responsible then to fix it, and how do they know what to do?
Sure. So I will be, as part of the process of creating this work, I'll be writing a maintenance manual, which will be quite detailed about all of the maintenance, the intervals that are required, and there will ultimately have to be quite a detailed and pretty hardcore legal contract between myself and the relevant parties, which will be the foundation, who's the main commissioning body, but also the council, setting out our responsibilities. Essentially, I will be handing over that responsibility for maintenance up to a point. I'll be setting it out. They may come back to me and commission me to do that maintenance, but they can also hand over that maintenance to any party they choose, and there will be detailed instructions on how to perform it. I will carry public liability and product liability, etc. insurance, which covers me to some extent for failure of it. But ultimately, the commissioning body and that contract will determine how that maintenance will occur.
I just have to give a little technical update, and I'm very sorry, but we're unable to resolve the issues around the failure of our file. It just didn't render properly, so I'm very sorry that you can't actually see the actual video that we created today, but you've got Alex, and that's better than a video. And what I might do, because I know what was in the video, I might actually just guide us through the video anyway to get Alex's words of wisdom. So our first video basically covered his background, his decision around why choosing Kinetic, the influences behind him and his work, how he got there, what kind of apprenticeship, for want of a better word, in his journey to become a professional artist, and choice of medium, why is he choosing the materials he works with, and how he resources his projects, and what kind of process and fulfillment that you would get. Now, we're probably not going to be able to cover all of that in the next 10 minutes that we have in the workshop, but I will maybe guide through that way, and then engage with you guys as we go through each step, and that way Alex can probably replicate his video live here at Rainbow Serpent. So we already spoke a little bit just before around the challenges of kinetics, but Alex has got a very interesting background, and he came into his artistry in a very, very unconventional way. We can get you in 1 minute. He came. So, do you want to just describe a little bit about your background? You know, like a bit of behind what drove you into Kinetic as an art form.
Well, when I left school, my first studies were in science, particularly physics and maths, and I love both because they kind of describe the way the world works at a fundamental level. But I think, as we very briefly saw in the movie, I found academia a bit too stifling for me. And I was something of a dilettante, studied many different things, a little bit of fine arts here and there, but never a full fine arts degree. Various practical skills. I worked for a blacksmith firm in London for quite a few years, which really refined my metalworking technical skills, and a lot of liberal arts, just about anthropology and people and culture and languages, and so I kind of love all aspects of what makes the world go round. I'm not sure if that was the entire question.
Oh, no. I mean, would anyone, I'll open it up always to the audience every time we take a pause. So, yep, we have somebody over here. Alex?
Thanks for all the information. It's really great. I didn't realise that this art form is so not happening around the world, which means you're doing cutting-edge stuff, and you're doing it without a degree up against that whole officialdom in, like you said, their over-cautiousness with a lot of their regulations. 1,000 claps to you. Alex, you're doing a really good job.
Oh, thank you.
And it really does excite me, and I hope to catch up with you later, because I've got a lot of skills and I'd love to help. Cheers.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that feedback. Alex actually did have an interesting, in lieu of an arts degree, he actually creatively blacksmithed in London for 3 years. Now, that's a very interesting pathway into any career, Alex, blacksmithing.
Well, yes, I was actually had my arts practice for maybe 10 years or nearly before that happened. and was quite passionate about making art and design and metalwork, but because I didn't have that professional background, I didn't feel like I fully had the skills to do what I needed to do, and this opportunity came up to go and work for this blacksmith in London. It was actually pretty tedious, frankly, but it really did professionalise my skills considerably. It wasn't an official apprenticeship, but it really allowed me to take what I do to another level. It gave me confidence to build bigger things and just taught me a lot of skills and how to operate in a professional manner.
I'll open up again as we're taking a breath. Yep, we've got a gentleman over here in the hat.
Hi, Alex.
Hi.
Thank you for all your work. I was here at Rainbow last year and I recognised one of the sculptures was at here last year.
Yep.
I spent about 30 minutes looking at that. It was fantastic. Thank you
Good.
very much. My question is twofold. First question is, can you give a real basic introduction to what Kinetics is and how maybe amateurs can use it in their homes if they wanted to start a project and get into it? And my second question is, you had a very creative and freelance entrepreneurship ride to where you are now in an industry that's not really quite dense and populated by people doing similar things. Can you give any advice to the young professionals here as to your principles and how you actually got there?
Okay, thank you for the question. So to your first part, I mean, kinetics in physics really is just the study of moving objects. So it is, I mean, effectively the term just means motion or aspects related to motion. One of my biggest sort of sculpture heroes is Alexander Calder, an American French sort of artist of the early 19th century, 20th century. And he made these amazing mobiles, which some or many of you may be familiar with. And he actually coined the term mobile, and he was really the first serious artist that's made moving sculpture. And so, I mean, for him, I mean, mobiles are sometimes a little trinkety thing in people's houses, but for him it was a very serious form of artwork, and it was witnessing one of his giant mobiles when I was about 8 or 9 years old in a museum in the States that really got me passionate about artwork in general and about movement. So, I mean, if you're just wanting to get into kinetic sculpture, I mean, a mobile, it can be an absolutely beautiful, exquisite thing, and it's not technically complex to make. It moves with the wind, and it can take on so many different forms. So that's just a awesome, easy starting point. So the second part of your question, where to any advice? That's tricky. I guess you just have to be really, truly passionate. It is a tough road as an artist. To be financially secure in it is not straightforward, and I guess you just really have to be dedicated and be prepared to do what part-time work you need to do to give yourself the time to, further your passions, and I guess take risks where you can, and just give it as much time as you can, and be prepared to stick it out for a long time. It's taken me, well, I'm a full-time artist now. I don't do any part-time work now, but it's taken a long time to get here. So, be prepared to give it a good long time.
And I'd just like to add something, because I've worked with a lot of artists over the last 2 decades, and Alex has always been probably one of the people I've liked working best with, because he goes beyond just being a talent. I mean, there's no just, but he's an extremely great practitioner of what he does, but he's also got a number of other skills that he puts into his work. So he's a project manager, he's extremely good at budgeting, he's timely, he's flexible. He has a lot of different skills which he brings into his practice that actually really, and particularly in this world where we're very much dominated by rules, bureaucracy, timeliness, all these things, he actually has other abilities that helps drive a project. I mean, we're on a 2-year project. You need to have stamina. You need to be able to, you've got to have a certain way of working that can enable you to get through stages. So there's more than just, he's got his creative talent, but there's other talents that he brings into every work situation. So I just wanted to add that as well. Okay, does anyone, we're going to be kicked out in a minute. Anyone else? We'll open it up again into the audience here. Yep. Here I can. Yeah.
Hello, this is probably a question for you both. As an artist that's starting to submit work, is there any mentorship or resources? Because, for example, pitching for Rainbow is pretty competitive. There's some great artwork. So, and the pitch is a big important part of actually getting across the line. Do you have any advice in that area?
Well, I guess, you need to... it is always hard. I guess the most important thing is to really believe in your own work, and I think if you're passionate about your work, that's just it's the first step. I guess you have to be able to demonstrate that you can deliver what you're excited about, and I guess that's those other skills of project management, especially for festival environment. The deadlines are everything. If you're late, you've missed the boat. And so you just have to demonstrate, show your process, spell out your process. I'm going to have this done by so and so at a time, and submit what you believe is a reasonable budget. And if you can back up those things just by your own documentation and your own reasonable process, I think that goes a long way.
For sure, and I think that's something. It's a really good point. And so now we've split Rainbow into two different submission areas for artists. So there are the established artists, and they have their one submission process, which can be highly technical, but once you get to a certain level of art and public art and festival art, you've refined those skills to present your work and people to understand how it's actually going to be built and how it'll be safe and the power. But we have the other process, and I'm going to hand over to Loretta in a minute. The other process is our emerging artist grants. So that is a very user-friendly way of submitting your ideas. It's not complicated. It's a simple 3 paragraphs with a budget and images to upload. It's not a lot of letters of support and the more convoluted arts grants that we torture ourselves with in the bigger spheres. So it's open to anyone. And what I think makes it a very, very important program is that it's completely non-biased. So we have a selection process, and I'll get Loretta to talk more, that actually takes away who knows who. Anyone is open to this, and it's competitive on meritocracy, not on who you know. So Loretta can just explain that to you because she manages the grants, and then I'm afraid that'll be it for today. So thanks, Loretta.
Thanks for the warning. That's all right. So I've been running the grants process through the foundation for the last 2 years, and we just get so many amazing applications coming through, and it's really hard for us to choose. We have a panel of about 5 people from various parts of the festival as well as the foundation, and we all work together to try and find the best pieces and the pieces from up-and-coming artists that we can actually try and highlight. So we've got 10 pieces at the festival this year. We've got grants ranging from $5,000 to $500, and the applications come in all sorts of manners, and we help the artists through the process. We speak to our teams here to see what rigging might be needed and want assistance, and we provide support with tools and power and that kind of thing as well, just to help enable the artists to make the pieces become live at the festival. So there's pieces like the Star up near the markets area to the left. That's called Stellarium. That was one of our $3,000 pieces. I don't know if you've seen the face just around here as well. That was a grant called the Memory Seed Grant in honour of Gavin Seed, a well-loved VJ who had been a part of the Rainbow family for a very long time. So we have art from all sorts of all kind of areas, and we essentially the applications come through, and once the panel process is done, we hand them over to the arts team at the festival. So that's where the foundation steps aside. We don't have the technical skills to make them live here, and the wonderful arts team at the festival work with the artist. So the grants open in around August each year, and generally open for a few months. So we're always available during that process as well to speak with the artists with any questions they might have. They close generally October, November each year, and it takes us about a month to go through everything, chat with the artists, try and refine the applications and understand how the pieces might work. And then we have our panel process for the final selection and notification in early December. So it's a really quick turnaround, especially from notification to actually getting the artworks up and running. So especially for some of the bigger pieces, it can be a little bit of a time constraint for some of the artists to make sure they've got all their materials and make sure the money comes through and that type of thing as well. But I think the artwork here, the other one, the $5,000 piece, is the whale shark over there, and Sam Anderson has done an amazing job getting that up and running in just about 6 weeks' time. So the quality is phenomenal, but don't be concerned. We get artists from every level and we help refine their pieces. There was one piece this year that we loved the concept of, wasn't quite refined. There was a few things with it, and we worked with the artist, and now it's an amazing piece. So we're there to support, and we're really wanting to bring up and coming artists within the festival. And also some of the applications that have come through, we're looking at ways that we can incorporate them into the arts trail and other work that we do with the foundation as well. So it's an ongoing process, and once we have we're getting up and running and have more capacity, then we'll be able to work more with the artists and really try and bring more value to the work and the artists that are a part of the Rainbow family. So look out on both the Rainbow Serpent website, social media, and the foundation website as well. So it's rainbowartsandculture.org. So cool.
And I have to say, the program wouldn't operate without Loretta and Erin, who's lying down, passed out. Because, there's a lot of work that goes in behind to enable the artists to be able to deliver their work. So we actually, we are a mentoring organisation in many ways. That's part of our mission, is to grow art and grow artists and support artists. So if anyone has any questions, we'll just go over that side. We are around all year. Unlike the festival, which disappears and it gets hard to connect in, we respond to email inquiries most of the year. So if anyone ever wants to do anything, don't have to wait for the grants, just email, we'll talk to you, and we hope to see something evolve into presentation here. And I just want to say a big thank you to Alex. As I said before, he's an absolute privilege to work with. He's just such a great artist and great colleague. And I apologise that we didn't show the video, but you got the live artists, and I think that's priceless. So look out on our website. In June, I think we'll be starting to upload the series since we've got our other platforms sorted. But thank you very much for coming and listening and sharing. And anyone can speak to us over there for a minute or two before we escape off into the festival. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lynne.